we'll go over a round robin of intros, and we'll jump into some topics from there. So some of the topics we'll be talking about: interactions with recruiters, nailing your job applications, gaps in work history, visas and sponsorship, and bias around ageism. All right, and I'll start. So my name is Kevin Grunwald. I've been in the TA recruitment space for roughly 10 years. I've worked in renewables, oil and gas. I've worked in industrial engineering, tech, sales and marketing. Been in that space. I've worked started my career on the agency side and then slowly worked my way over to the corporate side. So happy to be here and collaborate with this great panel of human beings and experts in doing things the right way when it comes to recruiting and TA. So I'll pass it over to Daryl.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this event. Super excited to be here. If you don't know me already, my name is Daryl. I am originally from the UK. I now live in Florida. Don't worry, I am safe. I'm happy to be here. Been a recruiter for the last 4 years. I recruit in aerospace and defense on the corporate side, and super pumped to answer your questions tonight and talk about an amazing product, which is Better. I'll pass it over to Chastity.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to have you all here, and definitely want to say that I'm sending my thoughts and prayers to the areas in Florida that are currently being impacted by the storm and that are anticipating that. So everyone, please stay safe if you're in Florida. And I wanted to introduce myself as well. My name is Chastity. I've been in recruiting for just over 3 years now, and also have a background as a career coach with over 5 years of experience there. I'm currently the hiring manager for our company that works with entry-level sports opportunities. So I work with football, basketball, and baseball jobs, and we currently have a baseball opportunity open. So feel free to check us out. And I will pass it to my dear friend, Melissa.
Yeah, I must say, Chastity, you have the coolest job ever. Just had to say that.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Melissa Grabner. I am based in Chicago. I have been in talent acquisition for about 20 years. I spent the majority of my career at a company called Takeda Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies, biotech pharma companies in the world. I was the global director of talent acquisition for our largest business unit across the globe. Currently, I have a small business I started helping job seekers with resumes, LinkedIn profile optimization, job search strategies, interview prep, so on and so forth. And I'm super happy to be partnering with Earn Better, which is really just a great, great company. I highly suggest checking them out. And thank you, Tuck, for your great partnership. And with that, I will hand this over to my friend, Andrew.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for the introductions. This is a great group of recruiters and professionals in the field who love to help people. And so grateful to be a part of this event. As a quick little intro for those who don't know me, I am a talent acquisition leader currently in the tech space, in the sustainability tech space. And I've been in the recruitment field for close to a decade now. My experience spans across Fortune 500 companies on the agency side. And then over the past few years, it's been more focused around tech startups. And yeah, just really enjoy supporting job seekers and providing resources, assets, perspectives that could be helpful in your job search. So thank you again to Earn Better, Tuck and the team for partnering with us on this. We've had a lot of great results in the past, so excited to do another one today. Tuck, over to you.
All righty. Well, thanks, everybody, and welcome to the event. Again, excited to kind of get to all the questions that were asked and just share as much as we can about kind of the job search today and ways to, tips and advice and various perspectives to kind of help you in your job search. So I'm founder and CEO of Earn Better. Earn Better provides completely free job search support services using AI. So everything from helping with your resume to cover letters to finding job matches to interview prep and training. The job of the job seeker is a hard one. We're going to talk a lot about that today. And we want to try to find ways utilizing AI and technology to make the job search easier. And so that's what we're all about, why we wanted to help put on this event. And with that, I guess I'll pass it back over to Kevin as we kick off the event.
Oh, I actually think it's going to be me. All right, Kevin, I saw that look on your face. You looked a little worried there.
He looked terrified.
I was looking for the mute button.
All right, everybody. So we have quite a bit to get into today. Thank you to everyone who submitted your question. This was incredibly insightful for us to kind of just see where people's pain points are, where maybe the most intrigue is in the job search process. And so we have a few different topics that we're going to lean into. The first topic that got brought up quite a bit is tips on interacting with recruiters. And so the first question I have, I'm going to toss over to you, Daryl, and any of the rest of the team can jump in. But what's the best way to do a 90-second intro during an interview?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for whoever submitted that. And I'll definitely add my little piece and then throw it to this awesome panel to contribute. It's a solid question because often recruiters in the discovery call and the phone screen, that's the first thing they're going to ask. Full transparency, we're human beings as recruiters. Sometimes we're pulling up notes. Sometimes we're trying to find your resume. Sometimes we're prepared. Sometimes we're not. But whatever it is, we want to break the ice as well as human beings. And often we'll soft serve you that question of, tell me about yourself. Like, what brought you? Why are you looking at the market? What interested you about the company? Give me your 60-second spiel, 90-second spiel. So this is a great question. I think there are so many tips, and there's no really right or wrong way to do it. I think the key thing is about being concise, learning and being able to communicate the value that you bring in a short way. No one, we all have short attention spans. People can't listen for that long. And as we ramble and go on tangents, even recruiters and hiring managers, honestly speaking, will get bored and can switch off. Why is this bad? Well, if they switch off and they lose interest, they're not listening to you, and then they're not going to be excited for you interviewing for the role. So 90 seconds to really bring the recruiter up to speed. Give them a quick run through of kind of your career, where your interest sits. Bring them up to present day. Perhaps why are you job seeking? Why are you looking at the market? Tie that quickly and closely to the company, the target company. And this is why I'm interested in your company. How can you get good at doing this? What I used to do was I would sit on the couch and grab an audio recording device and record myself, because we are often our biggest critics. And if we record our own little pitch and play it back to us, you're wanting to eliminate as many filler words as you can. So what I mean by that is you'll get these ums and ahs and and when you listen back to your recording of you talking about yourself, you can look for that and be like, oh my gosh. And the first time you do it, guys, it's going to sound terrible. You're going to have tons of filler words in there, and you really haven't said much in 90 seconds. But that allows you to then do a second draft. Like when you write an essay, like when you write a cover letter, you do drafts and drafts and drafts. Same thing with the audio recording. Go into it again, re-record yourself, go into it again. And then another thing you can do is take that one step further, jump on a call with a friend, jump on a call with a fellow HR professional, recruiter, career coach, somebody who knows what they're talking about, and do your 90-second spiel and get advice from them. But that's what I'll start off with. I'll throw it to the panel to add their voice to that question.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say great advice. Anyone else have anything else to add?
No, I think that is spot on. I think it's important that job seekers really do their homework about the company. And so perhaps you're able to tie in within that, very short time frame, not only why you feel you're a good fit for the job, but why you are excited about working at the company, because you want to express excitement right off the bat to really start the interview on a good note, to say, and show that energy, because typically we like to hire people that are energetic and we can see through that. So, definitely do your homework on the company and what as well as what the EVP is, what's the employee value proposition, why you are the very best fit for this particular position.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say also something important to keep in mind, just as Daryl mentioned about practicing, is being very clear and concise with your answers. I know, like, I'm very much a verbal processor and a talker. So sometimes I can just go on and on and on and on about things when there are ways to be able to, communicate what you need to, as far as when it comes to your experience, your skills, your abilities, with keeping that clear and concise. So just be mindful also of the time when it comes to practicing, and, maybe using a timer on yourself and being able to see how long it might take you to answer a particular question. That can be really beneficial for you.
Great answers. Great answers. The next question that came in around this topic, I'm going to toss it to you, Kevin. How perfect does a person's LinkedIn profile have to be?
Oh, man. Well, that's a good question. I think that, if you are doing a certain skill sets and certain positions, and they might be on your resume, but they're not on your LinkedIn. It's just one of those things where it actually adds questions that recruiters have to ask you in phone screens, because they're like, I see this on your resume, I don't see it on your LinkedIn. That's why it's so important to they don't have to be identical, but they need to be able to be tied to each other. Yeah, because it's only going to benefit you in the long run. Like you have the more skills you have listed, the more searches you're going to pop up in. The list goes on and on. On LinkedIn Recruiter, you put in, let's say you're a DevOps engineer, you're working with, a whole bunch of different softwares. Recruiters aren't going to know what you're working on if they're not listed. So it's very important to list to be very detailed when it comes to that.
Yeah, and to piggy off of that, I was just going to add that I think the way I like to think about it is use LinkedIn as kind of like an additional add-on to what's in your resume. I don't know, I can't speak for every recruiter, but I know a lot of recruiters that start with the resume, right? And they see a lot of good things there, but maybe they want a little bit more clarity on the type of company, the size of company, the industry that they've been in, or maybe just to get some fill in the gaps with some additional information. I think that's where LinkedIn can be an incredible resource, is to be able to really fill in the gaps, maybe provide a little bit more context, just basically kind of like further sell yourself to a recruiter who's looking at your profile. So that's how I've always kind of advised to look at it. And that's why it's important to have those kind of key details filled out. It doesn't have to be, to your point, Kevin, a copy paste of what's on your resume. In fact, I would argue that it probably shouldn't be. But at least there needs to be some kind of additional information there to add some color to maybe more of the kind of baseline information that's on your resume.
Yeah, I would, these are great. And I would also add that, this is what I coach my clients on, is that even if you're not looking for a job, but especially if you are looking for a job, always have your LinkedIn profile optimized. I would say, make sure to have a professional looking photo, high quality headshot. You certainly want to have a compelling headline. The space under your name is what I call prime LinkedIn real estate. Instead of saying what perhaps like digital marketer, you want to do something like digital marketing specialist / content creator / SEO enthusiast. You want to make sure to try to optimize the space that LinkedIn allows you, because the more compelling it is, the purpose is you want someone to take a look at your banner and your headline and have a really good reason to want to scroll down and look further into your background. I would also say the banner, which is the rectangular space behind your name. This is the first thing that everybody sees when they log onto your profile. I created my banner using a website called Canva, and I did it for free. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of that space on your profile and personalize it. So right off the bat, anyone who's looking at your profile will know a little bit about who you are and what you do. And then of course, I would make sure that, you know, your summary section is concise and it really highlights and captures your skills, experience, and goals. And then of course, you want to optimize your experience section, so on and so forth. And then also I would say too is customize your URL. I think that will make it easier for you to share your profile. It shows professionalism at the same time. It's really easy to do that. And so that's something that I strongly suggest. But really make your LinkedIn like your electronic resume times 10. And you want to make sure that it is optimized at all times. You never know when you might get a call from a recruiter or a hiring manager for a perfect opportunity. And you want to have a strong presence on the platform. So.
Great advice. Tuck, not to put you on the spot here, I was just curious if there was any resources that Earn Better had that could maybe apply to what we're talking about here as far as standing out, having a more well-defined profile, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation brings up a couple elements. You know, as we're kind of talking about like nailing your pitch, you know, that first 90 seconds, you know, I think Daryl called out, it's a lot about practice. And so we've got great kind of practice interview tools on our platform. So you're about to interview for a specific position. We'll look at your resume, we'll look at that position, and then you actually just practice those answers like voice to text, a real interview. And then we'll tell you how you did. We'll suggest ways to improve it. It can just be so hard to kind of practice those and get feedback. So, you know, as much as AI kind of can help make things easier, it can also just make practice easier, but it does take that hard work. And the more reps you do, the better you get. And so we want to make it easy, you know, to get those reps like on your couch or when you've got, you know, just time to do that from that standpoint. And I think, you know, the other aspect of it is, you know, one of our core products is helping you out with your resume for that first impression, because, you know, we want, you know, your strengths, your qualifications to really stand out. We don't want someone focused on how your resume is formatted. We want them focused on, here are the relevant skills, experiences that the person had that makes them really well suited for this position. And so again, we recognize that most people out there aren't expert job seekers. They're great at what they do. They're great recruiters or marketers or salespeople. And we want to kind of bring tools to people to help them, you know, have that expertise without needing to be kind of experts themselves in the job search process. So those are some of the things that we offer that we think could be helpful, you know, based on some of the topics we've covered so far.
Awesome. Thank you, Tuck. I want to touch on this final question before we shift focus and do another kind of topic. I want to ask this one to Melissa. This is a pretty big one, but I think this is something that people do go through. So the question that came in is, why do recruiters reach out to me and then not respond when I ask to have a call to discuss the job role? I also have recruiters asking me for my resume for a job I feel I'm qualified for, then I get no response after sending the resume. If I haven't talked to the recruiter, should I send my resume? And then also they stated that they've received a lot of emails from recruiters not in their state and their location, and their profile clearly states that they're not open to relocation. Any suggestion on how to navigate this?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can be frustrating when a recruiter reaches out to you as a job seeker and then they go silent. I think there's a couple of reasons for this. I don't necessarily want to speak on behalf of all recruiters, but working in the talent acquisition space, I can shed some light on this. I think one of the reasons might be simply a high volume of candidates. I mean, we're in a very, very competitive and challenging job market right now. And so it's not uncommon to have over 1,000 people apply to a particular position. And recruiters are often juggling multiple candidates at one time. And they might prioritize those that are further along in the process, which could lead to delays in communication. A lot of times too, what happens is companies change priorities behind the scenes. So they might put a job on hold. They might have filled the job internally. or they might have filled the job externally. And so they're not necessarily following back up with people who they've initially reached out to. And certainly I can understand and appreciate the fact that this is very, very frustrating. And, I think we have to show a little bit of grace as well for recruiters. A lot of companies in the last year or so have cut significant portion of their recruiting staff. So the recruiters that are left at a company, most companies, it's like a skeleton crew. And so they're working through very, very large volumes. Now, certainly I'm not saying that it's okay to ghost, because I post about this all the time, and it's something that is probably my biggest pet peeve. But recruiters are humans too. And sometimes there are simply legitimate reasons why they aren't responding. Although, my goal in posting what I do on LinkedIn is to kind of, share that it's not right to do that. But with that being said, if you're not getting a response, I think it's fine to follow up. I actually suggest that, because I think in today's very challenging job market, job seekers have to be really their own best advocate, and to follow up politely once or twice is absolutely acceptable. If you still don't hear a reply, I would say after 2 follow-ups, it's probably best to move on and explore other opportunities. And at least if you follow up and you don't hear back, at least that you tried, right? I get this question asked a lot on LinkedIn, where people say to me, I interviewed for a job on Monday and it's like Friday and I haven't heard back. And I say, follow up, be your own best advocate. And again, the worst that can happen is you don't get a response. And I think the good thing about following up is it shows your proactiveness and your professionalism. And you might then be in the forefront of the recruiter's mind, where they might say, oh yeah, I was supposed to get back to this person and I didn't. And I'm so glad they reached out to me. So always be your own best advocate, but we have to kind of balance that with just all the volume that is on recruiters' plates right now. It's a really, really challenging time, for recruiters. But absolutely, I always think it's best to follow up. And again, always be your own best advocate. Andrew, do you mind? I'm sorry, saying the next question?
Well,
Sorry.
we can switch gears. That was, well, I guess, okay. So you touched on the first part. There was a kind of a few different areas of that question. The other one was around location. So they're receiving emails from recruiters that are not in their local area or their state, and their profile clearly states that they're not open to relocation. So they were just wondering how they can basically stop getting spammed with these.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear the panel's view on this. I don't know if there is a way to do that. I mean, I could tell you what's been happening to me lately is I'm getting a lot of text messages from these random employment agencies, and I don't know how they get my number, but it'll say like, here's a message and press Y if you're interested, or click N if you're not. And so I don't know how to eliminate that from happening. And I wish that it did stop. I think there's a lot of companies right now that are also preying on job seekers, which is clearly wrong. And unfortunately, that continues to happen. I don't know if there is necessarily a way to stop that, but certainly I'm not the expert. Does someone else have a thought on this?
I've received something similar in the past. It almost comes off it definitely comes off spammy, but I mean, at that point, you really got to question, the validity of the position.
Right.
Or moving forward, you really got to do your due diligence, because, I mean, there's just so much of that going on right now. And and I feel for job seekers that, put up their open to work banner, and they just get slammed with a lot of that. And it's, I can see how it would be frustrating. But unfortunately, I haven't figured out a way to stop that. I mean, I'm still getting them. So I'm assuming maybe just report them and report to spam, and hopefully that minimizes it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, probably just a best practice is, if the recruiter that's reaching out to you isn't talking to you about something, or coming to you with something that's relevant and in your space, and, clearly they haven't done the work, the due diligence to know that you're qualified for the job, to at least have a discussion about a job, it's probably not worth pursuing. just because of all the high level of spam and, you know, the people that are taking advantage of those that are job searching. So, you know, I don't want to tell anyone what to do, but I think it's probably better to just have your guard up and, you know, determine pretty quickly if that person knows what they're talking about or not. All right, let's shift gears here. We've got a couple other topics to get into. So the second topic that got brought up quite a bit in the questions that were submitted was this idea of nailing your job applications. So Daryl, I want to start with you. And the first thing we're going to talk about is everybody's favorite boogeyman, the ATS system. And so I would like you to give a perspective. And, you know, the question that came in is, how do recruiters sift through resumes in their ATS systems to make sure that qualified candidates' profiles and resumes don't get lost? So I'd like to maybe start there with you, Daryl.
Awesome. Yeah, big question. Definitely can't speak as the authority on every single ATS out there. I've worked with half a dozen or so, some good, some okay, and some very, very terrible systems. But long story short, like, you know, if you scroll on LinkedIn, you will see all kinds of myths and fables on what an ATS is. It stands for Applicant Tracking System. So really, it's a system put in place to help HR and staffing and recruitment teams to really kind of funnel talent into the system and have them go through some rounds of interviews, meet with some people, and get hired or get rejected. And some systems are very, very intricate and nowadays come with lots of AI and bells and whistles. And some are really, really basic, which is just a big bucket full of names. But what they all have in common is they are really just digital filing cabinets. When you get down to the bare bones, when you get down to the skeletal structure, they are several different buckets that we can put talent in and really help categorize the people that we're looking at. And so typically what will happen is you apply, you know, on the user end, the UI end, and you throw in your resume and your application, and that will kind of put you in this first bucket, which typically is the review stage. Recruiters will wake up, drink their coffee, eat their breakfast, log on to their computer, and they'll see all these people that have applied. And then they have a choice to make. A human being has a choice to make, to look at your resume and to decide, is he or she qualified, appropriate for this role? Should I put them forward and advocate for them to the hiring manager? They'll make a very quick decision. Now, you know, the famous saying is a recruiter spends 6-7 seconds on your resume. Typically it's longer than that. But they'll look through your experience and they'll make that decision. And they'll move you forward, or they'll reject you. The myth and the fable of are you being rejected? That's pre-built in qualification questions, which a lot of ATS systems can do. But again, those are still programmed by a human. Those are still approved by an HR function, and they're really there to help us save time. So to answer the question, that was a little bit of context. To answer the question of how we sift through, really, that's why AI, I think, is so popular right now, and why a lot of companies are working hard to create tools to help us. Because really, at least in my experience, and maybe the panel will jump in with different, but at least from my experience, what I've seen is it's still a lot of manual and heavy lifting. Like I work on very high volume roles in aerospace and defense. We're talking 600, 700, 800 applicants, and I've spent several hours looking through resume after resume. But what we get good at is, and that's where that 7-second thing comes from, is we've got very good at just quickly looking through resumes. But I'll open it up to the panel, because everyone's experience is a little different, and see what else we can contribute.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Very detailed. Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, making sure that you're filling out your application completely. If you leave any knockout questions blank, or if you leave any of them, if you answer them incorrectly, there's a good chance that you could get auto rejected, and that might be why. So that's just my thoughts and what I've seen in my experiences working in 8 different ATS systems. So anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to that, first off, like one myth, there's no one monolithic system. There's no one monolithic process. Different recruiters have different processes in different industries. So it really varies quite a bit. And so then that begs the question, like, what's in your control and what can you actually do to improve your chances? Because at the end of the day, it is kind of like a numbers and funnel game, right? And you need to submit applications. You then need to get to the next step, et cetera, in order to have success in your search. And so it's one of the reasons why we developed some of the tools that we have, which is, all right, let's take your resume, let's make sure it's in a format that the ATS can just ingest appropriately and bring in the right set of experiences, et cetera. We also have tools that'll look at the job description, look at your resume, and maybe that job description's calling out, hey, we really want someone with Salesforce experience. And so we don't see Salesforce in your resume, and we'll suggest, hey, do you have Salesforce experience? If so, it looks important to this job, and we'd recommend you consider putting it in. And so any one of those activities is not necessarily going to fundamentally change the outcome for any position. But if you do that and make sure you kind of share relevant skills, relevant experiences, in each of those applications, make sure they kind of shine through in your resume, it does boost your chances with each, individual one. And so it's really about how do you just showcase those clearly, cleanly, and conspicuously what's most relevant about your own background for that given position. I think there was a comment I saw about, like, should you have 100% match for every, job that you're submitting in? I would argue you shouldn't, because that's pretty suspicious. And I've, begun to hear there are some folks that will just kind of completely redo their resume, fabricating experiences in order to try to perfectly match that job description. And if anything, that, could be, somewhat suspicious from that standpoint. So again, always kind of recommend grounding it in the truth. What are your skills? What are your experiences that are most relevant to this position? Again, we provide free tools to help find out what those are and easily get them added to your resume, because we know it takes a lot of time. And so we try to automate what we can. But those are some elements that, I'd at least call out from, some of the tools that we're developing to try to help job seekers in this regard.
Yeah, Tuck, I want to piggyback off of something you just said that I agree with. So I get asked a lot, do I need to be 100% matched to the job description to apply? Would it make sense if I'm less than 100% match? And what I would say is, out of all the hundreds and hundreds of people I've hired throughout the years, very, very few were actual 100% match. And here's why. I believe that people need room to grow, develop, and flourish into a position. And if you hire, my philosophy is, if you hire someone who's a perfect match, in 4 months, are they going to get bored and try to do the next thing? And you want to hire people, and I post about this a lot on LinkedIn. Like, to me, if someone can show that they have a good character and they're hardworking and they're going to be dedicated and they have high IQ and can get along with others and are a cultural fit, most jobs you can teach someone, right? Like, you can't teach someone to be a software engineer. You can't teach someone to be an attorney, but a lot of jobs, I would say most jobs you can teach. Right. So if you're not 100% match, don't stop that from applying to the job, because again, people need room to develop into their job. So, with all the hundreds of people I've hired over the years, I've had really good success with not hiring people who are a perfect match. And so what I typically say is, if you're about us, and this is, my personal opinion, I think other people might have a different view on it, but if you're like, I would say 70% match, 75% match, apply. And there might be something on your background that the recruiter says, wow, I really like this person because I see they have XYZ within their background. So just don't self-reject before you try, is my strong opinion.
Awesome. Melissa, since you've got it going on right now, I'm going to keep it flowing with you. There was actually a few questions that came in around job gaps or gaps in your resume. One of them was asking about how to address when you have a gap in your resume because a close family member passes away. Another one was asking about short, unrelated, or short toxic jobs and leaving those off of your resume. And, just overall, do you need to put the reasons for your gaps in your, the gaps in your employment on your resume? So I wanted to just hand it off to you. Maybe you can touch on a few of those different angles, but what is the philosophy that people should have, or the perspective people should have around leaving things off or adding things to their resume?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what happened to me many, many years ago. I was at a job for 4 months and I quit my job because I was miserable. I didn't put it on my resume because it was 4 months and I didn't want to have to explain why I only worked at a company for 4 months. And I just decided to leave it off. I just made that decision. Now, the question about if there's a relative that you have that passes away, the approach that I would consider is perhaps within the experience section of your resume, you can include a line like, for example, took a career break for family reasons, month, year to month, year. And I would say for anybody who does have a gap, if there are things that you did during that time, if you volunteered, if you have any freelance projects you did, include those on your resume to show that you were still active within, I guess, making the best version of yourself and actually using that time wisely. I don't know if it's a one size fits all answer. I think it depends on how long you have the gap for. I will say this too regarding gaps is, we are in a time where there are so many people who have been laid off from their jobs for a variety of reasons, right? And it's as everyone knows on this call, it's a very, very challenging time looking for work. I don't think there's that stigma about gaps as perhaps there once was. I could tell you when I'm recruiting for my positions, to me, what I care about is the person qualified? I don't really hone in on the gap or that doesn't take precedence in my mind. It's, are they a fit and is this person worth talking to? So if you have a gap, don't shy away from it, own it. And I post about this a lot on LinkedIn. There's no rule that says we always have to be working, right? So if I decide to take 6 months off, that's my choice. There's no law that says Melissa Grabner always has to be in corporate America or has to be earning a paycheck. People leave jobs for a variety of reasons. People have gaps, right? People have babies, people relocate, people get laid off for a long period of time. So to me, the stigma around a gap is not nearly as perhaps what it used to be. But in terms of should you put it on your resume, I think a good rule of thumb is it depends on what your comfort level is and how long you have that gap for. I would say if it's 6 months or more, I would say probably put it on your resume. But if it's less, just omit it altogether. Certainly, I would love the thoughts of my panel here because I think that you can ask 6 people and you might get 6 sort of different answers, and my answer is not golden. This is just my opinion. So, is there anyone on the panel? I hate to throw it back to you guys, but I think this is an important topic because there are so many people that are facing this issue.
Yeah, I'll kind of jump to the other side of things here and address this question. I actually have had some opportunities where they were more shorter stints, where I was at companies for maybe 9 months and I left for another opportunity. But if you look at my resume, you can see that it was actually career progression. I left from doing career coaching for nearly 5 years and jumped into being a recruiter because I wanted to progress in my career and take on a new role where I would be on the other side of hiring and not just so much as in the practicing and the teaching of the coaching of the different skills and things like that. And then even in one of my last roles, I was working with talent acquisition. And then the role that I'm currently in happens to be in my dream industry, working in sports. Like Melissa said, I do have a pretty awesome job, so I ended up taking that opportunity after being with the company for a short amount of time as well. So I think in having those opportunities where it looks like you're just hopping from job to job, if you're progressing in your career, make no apologies for that. Like, you're doing what is best for you, and really no one can blame you for that. I had people who were at my former companies who told me about leaving and stuff, like, oh, you left soon, but they understood also because they knew that I was leaving to progress in my career. So I also had, their support on the back end of things when it came to leaving and going on to a new opportunity. So if you're leaving to advance and progress in your career, I say more power to you. And you can gladly speak to that when it comes to those questions that come up in job hopping.
I will jump in just to add a little piece. Love the thought shared by Melissa and Chastity there. Obviously, as recruiters, we are huge advocates for the job seeking community. We have your back. We want you to succeed. But I do want to look at the other side of the coin as well as a recruiter and a hiring professional. We have to, and this really is playing devil's advocate, right? Let's offer a different line of thought. So we have to put ourselves in the seat of the hiring manager in their mind. They're obviously looking for the best talent, the best person that they can find right now. Now, for most jobs out there, having a gap for all the reasons already discussed is totally fine, totally great. Sometimes though, it can be detrimental the longer that gap goes. So I work in aerospace, right? It's a very highly regulated environment. A lot of people have clearance, security clearance. Clearances expire, and technical skills. I recruit people who build engine components for aircraft, and so their skills have to be very up to date, very highly technical all the time. Now, if I was talking to an engineer who had an 18-month gap compared to an engineer who did not, 9 times out of 10, we are going to go for that engineer who is up to date with potential clearances, up to date with potential skills. So my advice, now I know that doesn't offer you guys a solution for all of those struggling job seekers who are looking, but my advice is to really address the elephant in the room right away. I'm seeing some of the comments that are coming in of like, hey, should I just address it when the hiring manager brings it up? Should I just leave it and hopefully it goes unnoticed? When you're in that interview, address the elephant. Hey, I know my resume ends. I spoke to someone yesterday who her resume ended July 2023, right? And so as a recruiter, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. There's a story here. I didn't even get to ask her. She addressed it right away, brought it up hey, I know you're going to ask me about my resume ending in July 2023. Let me tell you what I've been doing since then. She had a lot of personal things going on. She'd had parents who had been sick. She'd gone through a divorce. She'd gone through several things. That's all well and good and justified the reason. But what she did that was really attractive and really cool was she talked to me about the passion projects and the personal projects that she had continued to do to keep her skill refined and sharp. Completely put me at ease because I knew my job is to turn around and go and advocate for this candidate to the hiring manager. And she gave me all the ammunition I needed to be her champion. So long story short, gaps are not bad, but you have to remember that you're trying to be the most attractive candidate. And so address the elephant right away, and then make sure that while you have this gap, continue to be doing passion projects and personal projects that are loosely tied to your craft so you can advocate for yourself.
Well said, Daryl, and great answers across the group. All right, Kevin, I got one for you. I think this one people are going to get a good chuckle out of. How important is a cover letter? Do recruiters actually read cover letters? And if so, what makes a cover letter stand out?
Well, some recruiters do, some recruiters don't. I personally, in some of the roles that I've had, I think that there's a couple different ways you can use cover letters to really benefit your job search and how to really legitimize your experience. And one of the biggest things that I would focus on if I was on the job search is find the 2 or 3 most important skill sets that they're looking for in the job duties or responsibilities, and ask yourself, how does my experience intertwine with this, and use that mindset and how to build out your cover letter. Really, it's not a cover letter anymore. It's more so here's how I'd be a great fit for the role. And then you use parts of that job description in that cover letter. And that's in my eyes, I mean, there's no better way to show that you can do a job then directly relate your experience with the job duties and responsibilities of a cover letter. And then from there, I mean, you obviously you send that to the recruiter after you apply, not before, because recruiters, and even if recruiters are active on LinkedIn, I mean, I miss messages all the time. I mean, I'm not able to get to all of them sometimes. So the best thing you can do is, usually in the application section in ATSs, there's an area where you can upload extra documents, put it in there. And then when you reach out to the recruiter, or you figure, usually on LinkedIn, there's a section where you can meet the hiring team, reach out to them, send them the cover letter, and then you can, give them a little blurb. Hey, I applied to X position. Here's why I think I'd be a great fit. I have, X amount of years doing X, Y, and Z skills. To me, that's the best way to stand out. I do read cover letters. I mean, for a lot of my positions, a lot of people don't submit them sometimes, but I do read them. So if you're applying to any of my positions, yes, I will be reading your cover letter.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, I think what I agree with what Kevin shared is, you just don't know what the recruiter behind the job, what their preferences are, what they're looking for. And so, rewind 5-10 years ago, kind of customizing a cover letter for every different position, it could be just such a time-consuming activity. And so, when you look at all the jobs that job seekers need to do, one of them is prepare a great, compelling, personalized application. And so, with tools like Earn Better, we want to provide a completely free service that helps automate some of these more tedious aspects of the job search. And so, with Earn Better, you can kind of get a draft of a cover letter in seconds, and then encourage you to kind of personalize it, tailor it kind of as you see fit. But instead of it taking 30 minutes like it might have done 5 or 10 years ago, you're kind of spending kind of much less time. But then, what I'd encourage is, how do you then kind of use that extra time in a way that's advantageous in your search? And so I've seen some of the comments in the event around networking and how powerful that can be in your job search. So, spend a little less time on your cover letters, but maybe a little bit more time networking, right? Or preparing for that interview that's coming up and things like that. And the last thing I'd say is, we've talked about, a lot of like the why, like, why are you interested in this position, but also why are you a great fit for this position too. And I do think a resume tells you a lot about the what, who, kind of what you've done in the past, what companies you've worked for. But I do think the more a cover letter is a slightly different format that enables you to tell the why, maybe why you had a gap in your work experience, touching on the conversation earlier, why you're specifically excited about a given position. Because I do think recruiters really want to hear, I'm excited about not just any position, but this position, and here's why, and I'm connecting the dots to help make it easy for you, the recruiter that's dealing with so much, connect the dots and understand why it could be a great fit. And, in Daryl's words, help them be that champion for you. So that's, some of what kind of comes to mind as I think about the cover letter is, how to kind of utilize it effectively in your search, but also think about how you allocate your time and what would be most effective.
Well said. Well said.
Awesome. Well, I know we got about 9 minutes before we jump into our live Q&A. So I want to touch on one more topic that I think is something that people think about and talk about a lot, but maybe doesn't get addressed and cleared, and the air cleared. So Chastity, this one's for you. Thinking about the topic of ageism. People have asked about ruling candidates out based on their age. They're wondering if they should remove key dates from their resume. I've had someone submit a question that they're in their 50s now and they want to know how much that affects them getting hired. And they asked what the best strategy for a resume is when you're trying to get in the new field of work. So I'd love for you to just maybe kind of tackle this a little bit. Maybe it's a little more broad, or we can narrow it down. How should people think about this?
Yeah, ageism is definitely a hot topic out there right now, especially as the layoffs have continued to happen, and people are having to pivot opportunities, and even those who are applying for opportunities that might be more of an entry level in a different industry, they're concerned about things like ageism. So for me, I recommend that you don't put those dates on your resume. You can still mention, having a diploma or having a degree without having to mention the dates there. And then if you're applying for job opportunities that are asking for maybe 5 to 10 years of experience and you have more than that, you can certainly put 10 plus without going into you have 20 or 30 years of experience. And for me, and some of the jobs that I've hired for are more entry level opportunities. But I don't let, someone who's had multiple years of experience, I don't let them just slip past me, or I don't just overlook them, because you never know why that person is wanting to enter into that job opportunity. It could be a skill in that role that they're wanting to hone in on or to really learn about, especially working in sports. We have individuals who've applied for our jobs who are former coaches who are going into, more entry level scouting roles just because they love the sport. They are passionate about it. So I don't overlook those individuals, because you never know, like I said, the reason behind why they're doing that, unless we, like they mentioned, use maybe a cover letter to kind of address that they're really wanting to hone in on certain skills. But when it comes to ageism, unfortunately, there are, some recruiters or some companies that do practice that. But for myself personally, it is not something that has impacted me and looking at candidates that I hire. And I also recommend that you don't have to put those dates on your resume. But would love to hear from my fellow panelists and their experiences.
Yeah, I get asked, first of all, that was beautifully said. I get asked this question all the time. And so, the truth is that ageism does exist in corporate America. As much as I hate to say that, I actually posted about this recently because it bothers me that it exists. Companies that are taking a pass on what I would consider older workers. And I say that, like I'm 53 years old, so I'm considered an older worker. So I'm saying that as someone who's in that bucket. To me, some of the best people I've ever hired have been older. They have a sense of maturity. They have a sense of, they kind of know what they want. They're not looking to necessarily continue to climb the corporate ladder, or they have amazing experience, right? And so companies that bypass older workers off the bat are, in my opinion, foolish. But the truth is that ageism does exist. I can tell you, generally speaking, like for my resume, I don't have any information on my resume more than 20 years ago. And here's why. Because what I did over 20 years ago isn't relevant to my skill set that I have now. Technologies in the world change all the time. So what people learn so many years ago most likely isn't even going to be relevant to now. So again, for me, I go back 20 years. I don't think adding any of my jobs prior to 20 years is going to add any sort of value to me, right? Because the bulk of my experience has been within the last 20 years. I'd say it's an individual decision in terms of how far back you want to go in your resume. But even if you look at someone who's like in the IT field, right? I mean, technologies are changing at rapid speed. So the technology someone might have been trained on and worked on in 1995 might even be outdated now. So it's not pertinent to the life in the world we live in today. But again, as someone who's older myself, 20 years is all I went back, and I think it was completely sufficient. But again, I think that's more of a personal decision.
And just real quick, again, I'm talking from aerospace, defense, government contract work. It's a whole different world. Graduation dates are really, really important because we have really strict employment verification rules. So we will verify when you graduated. We will verify that you have a degree, because a lot of our jobs, require like technical degrees. So my point is, certain industries that you're wanting to get into, you'll find that they have these kind of like strict rules. And that's okay for certain industries. But for other industries where it's a little softer on that, absolutely, I see, like to Melissa's point, I see a lot of people just going back 15 years, only including the really relevant stuff. And as they're getting more senior, leaving dates off. I always, when I consult and advise people, I always think that's a very personal choice, and you just got to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah, I think those are all great responses. I would just add in, when you're in the interview stage, just focus on your most recent experience, to really show them and to really keep that in the back of their minds about how your current experience is relevant to the role. And, hopefully that'll leave a more lasting impression.
All right. Great answers, everyone, and great questions. So thank you to everyone who submitted them. I wish we had time to answer all of them, but we are coming up on our kind of last leg of this event, which is a live Q&A. And Chastity is going to be going through, she's been fielding your questions, and she's going to read them off, and the group will answer them in real time. So Chastity, over to you.
Yes.
Chastity, let me know which ones I can, I guess there's an option here where I can pop them up on the screen. So
yes, that's great.
Nice.
Do that.
Let me know.
So this one's from Aubrey Delphin Smith. And it just says, what are your thoughts on including recommendation letters? Some of the applications I have filled out have asked for additional info. I've been submitting my letters because I believe it shows who I truly am by other professional colleagues and supervisors. So for Aubrey, we're wanting to know about those recommendation letters that we've talked about. Cover letters before, but what about recommendation letters?
Gosh, that's so helpful, Kevin. Thanks for that.
Dude, is that the wrong one?
I was
I
on.
know,
it's
that's good.
the wrong question, but the right
I
person.
saw you scrambling, scrolling for it. I'm like, is he gonna find it? Is he gonna find it? Yeah, go ahead, guys. I don't have a thought right now.
Chessie, should I answer that question? Okay. So my thought is, why not include it, right? I mean, it's not going to hurt your candidacy, and if it provides additional context about who you are, why not? There's no harm in it. I would.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to kind of everything we've talked about today, which is there's no single way that recruiters operate, and so I'm always of the belief that, as Tuck had mentioned, you want to create this really high quality application, right? And so that's inclusive of your resume. That's potentially inclusive of your LinkedIn profile. If you're a technical person and you have a portfolio, that's going to be really important. So you could look at it as another asset to add to kind of that application that you're creating, right? This resource that you're creating for potential employers. So no right or wrong way. I think that the key here would be differentiating these between references and recommendation letters. That might be a little confusing. So just make sure that you're clarifying that that you're not submitting your references in advance, but these are more so people who are speaking on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, just to add here too, people have just such a depth and breadth of kind of experience, and having someone else speak about you and your experience just provides, again, a view into you as a candidate in a different light that you'll see in a resume or see from you speaking about yourself. So yeah, kind of agree with the comments that it likely won't hurt, and it potentially could help. So, why not? I think the other thing I'd add is, it could be something that you add to, a little bit of a drip campaign. You follow up, you get the recruiter's email. Hey, wanted to call out, some of my strengths of my last supervisor that are relevant to this role and attach it from that standpoint. So it's nice to give a little bit new content and different content for a recruiter to react to versus just the same resume that you might have submitted, as you're following up. So I like the idea of kind of utilizing it as a little bit of a different kind of perspective on you to help kind of broaden the picture of you as a candidate for a potential recruiter.
Awesome. Here is a bit of an interesting question. So this was just from LinkedIn user. What about the recruiter calls you to describe your experience and the next day calls again to ask about your salary to see if they can compare it with a new customer? How do you guys feel about that?
what are they meaning exactly? Like they're asking for the salary to compare to another one of their candidates?
Yeah. So it says in the end, the recruiter says the name of the client by mistake, and they want to know also, is it worth applying with the recruiter who took out the job description from the electrician job specifically, ending to find out that the job recruiter was ghosting, and it was changed to an electrical engineer.
I think I get the gist of what they're saying, but I think what I would take away from this as somebody who's worked, first of all, you'll see this if it's an agency recruiter that's reaching out to you, typically to, if they specialize in a certain space or industry, they'll reach out to have a discussion. They'll ask you about your salary requirements. And that's usually because they have a couple potential clients that they want to submit you to or consider you for, which is not necessarily a bad thing if they're great at what they do, right? The problem is there's a lot of folks who aren't, and don't do this well. And so then you run into situations like this. My recommendation would be, as somebody who's been on that side of the desk, there's nothing wrong with vetting agency recruiters as you talk with them, especially if they're someone who's claiming to be specialized in a space or an industry, really digging in to see, how connected they are, how much they're able to share. Me personally, if they're not willing to give me if they weren't willing to give me a clear breakdown of the opportunity, and give me kind of something to walk away with, to understand if it's actually even a right fit for me, and it's super vague and super ambiguous, realistically, it's probably not worth your time, just because you're putting yourself at risk of getting your hopes up and then being let down. Two, on the very end of it, you could be looking at being in a spam situation or a scam situation. So yeah, I would just say, as you're working with these types of recruiters, if you want to have conversations with them, that's okay. Just make sure that you're doing your due diligence and you're vetting them and making sure that they actually are able to offer the information that you need to make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's solid, Andrew. It's the world of staffing and agency headhunters. It's a massive one. I spent a little bit of time in it, but they all operate very differently. And it sounds like, just from this, question, it sounds like, you weren't dealing with the best agency recruiter, the best headhunter. There's so many reasons why they might want to know your last salary. They shouldn't really be asking that question. It's much better phrased, asking you what you're looking for and then giving you clear information on the salary band that they're working with. But yeah, it seems like you had a bit of a disappointing experience. Sorry about that.
Thank you all. Next question is from Gerald Singleton. What does it mean when a job says that you're not a cultural fit? We kind of touched on the culture fit when we were talking about the cover letters. So what do you all think about it when a job says that you're not a good cultural fit?
I think I'm going to assume that Gerald means when a recruiter says versus when a job says. So I'm going to go under that assumption. I think what the recruiter or hiring manager might be alluding to is that in terms of a culture, they might be thinking that perhaps the candidate's work style, personality, behaviors, perhaps even their values don't align with the company's culture. Maybe the work style, maybe, because different companies have different approaches to teamwork, decision-making, communication. And if they assess that a candidate's style is in sharp contrast to what the norm is of the company, they might see that individual not being a good cultural fit. Perhaps the recruiter or hiring manager feels that the individual might not interact dynamically or well with the existing team. Perhaps the hiring manager or recruiter feels that the individual might not be adaptable to the level that they need this person to be. Perhaps it could be someone's cultural background. I think that if it was me and I was told this, I would want to know more feedback. So I would probably ask for some additional clarification on that and with some examples. Not every person is going to be a fit with every company culture. That's for sure. And I wouldn't, I guess, take this too hard or beat yourself up too much about this. But certainly I think it's fair game to ask for clarification and get a little bit more information. Perhaps if you are given this feedback, it could help you navigate your job search process a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, you want to find roles that are a better match for your personal and professional style, and that is really going to mesh with the companies.
Also, it looks like at first I was hearing this question from like as still a candidate, right? Like they've interviewed and the recruiters come back with feedback of you're not a culture fit. But now that the question's up, thanks, Kevin.
Oh, sorry.
Now the question's up. It's actually that he's got the job and he's 2-3 weeks into the job, never late, never called in sick, late, whatever. And then they've come to him and let him go and said that he's not a culture fit. So that's a completely different scenario. That's the reality is that the manager or leadership has decided that you're not a fit for the team, and perhaps that's due to you haven't meshed well, on a work level. It's a really hard question to answer because we're not that team, we're not that manager, and it could have very much been a poor decision on their part. But we can't really answer that question because we're not in that environment. We don't know you, and we're not the manager that made that decision. But I'm sorry that happened, Gerald. That sucks.
Thank you all. Next question up is from Timothy Truesdale Jr. What wise salary negotiation tactics would you recommend for candidates to use during interviews for a role? So we're talking about salary negotiations.
That's such a good question. Kevin, you've been I know you've been busy with the questions. Do you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple really good tools that you can use to really help find, get an idea of, what realm to be in. Starting off, I think that it's important to ask recruiters what the midpoint is, the targeted midpoint for whatever position that they're interviewing for. I think that that'll really give them a really good idea of what the true budget is without asking what's the budget. I think, we can all agree sometimes, when it comes to candidates and hiring, right? Unfortunately, like Melissa mentioned earlier, I wish we could hire everybody in at the max, but it just doesn't work that way. We have to leave room for development, growth. So I think that it's a really great way to start the conversation, to be able to get it going in the right direction. Figuring out what that targeted midpoint is versus just, asking like the recruiter, what's the budget? I think that kind of gives a little bit more in depth on it. Anyone else?
Yeah, no, happy to. I think that's right. I think, what I'd add is, it's just another opportunity for you to showcase the type of employee you'll be, right? Someone that does their homework, that is prepared, that communicates in a fair, reasonable, and effective way. So things that you could do, I think, that are helpful here, one is just do your homework, right? So as I was looking at positions like this that are similar, there are a number of different sites out there that you can kind of look at that will kind of help understand, by position, by role, what does the compensation look like? And that, just will give you confidence in speaking about it, but also demonstrate to that employer that you're hardworking, you're prepared, you're doing your homework, you're conversing with data, et cetera. And then the other is, generally with negotiations and things like that, always appeal to like what's reasonable, right? And what's fair. And it's not in an emotional, who's right, who's wrong, but more kind of appealing to, well, this is what it looks like, kind of the averages are, what I'm seeing in the space. What are you seeing? How do you get, the numbers you do on your end? Because again, you're always kind of wanting to showcase in these moments with recruiters, with hiring managers, with companies that all your skills and, what you'll bring to the table as a full-time employee. So those are a couple of things I'd add, as you're thinking about bringing up salary in the recruiting process.
Can add something real quick. wise salary negotiation tactics. So a lot of like, if a company is really good, they're going to have an appropriate salary band. Probably 20 to 30K is going to be their salary band, and they structure it in such a way that people who meet the requirements on the lower end are going to be in that first 10K, and then mid-level people, and then the higher people. So you need to be able to understand where you sit in the market. Am I meeting, like to Melissa's point earlier on, applying to a role 70-75% meeting the minimums? If you're meeting 70% of the job spec, you shouldn't be demanding the very top of the bracket. If you're meeting 80-85% of the job, you're probably going to be in the mid. And if you're at like the 95% mark, where you really hit a lot of the mins and you've got the experience, then you can be in a position to sit at that top. What I will say, just for like a pro tip, and this is just me, is really ask for 5 to 10K over what is your actual happy number. If your happy number is 100, let's say the job is 90 to 120, and your happy number is 100. Don't go in and say, I'm looking for 100, because it's your happy number. Go in slightly above what your walkaway number is. The reason why I say this is because companies are also going to be negotiating with you. Hiring managers are also going to be negotiating with you, and you guys can land in a nice middle ground that's appropriate. They're happy, and ultimately you're happy because you got to the number that you wanted. Now make sure that's obviously realistic, but go in and negotiate slightly higher than what your happy number is, and fingers crossed that you both land where you wanted to actually be in the end.
Awesome responses, everyone. Thank you for your input. Next question we have is from Raul. How do companies measure success of applicants over 3, 6, and 9 months? And what are some of the key KPIs that one must adhere to? And I think mainly addressing here is, can you say no to a particular task assigned if you have too much on your plate already? And what kind of impression might that have?
I could take the, if that's okay, I could take the first one. I think I'm going to assume you meant, how do companies measure success of new hires over 3, 6, and 9 months? I think that from my experience, what a lot of companies do is they have key performance, it's called KPIs, key performance indicators. A lot of roles have defined KPIs that employees are expected to meet, typically within a specific time frame. And depending on your job, this could be like a sales target, a project completion, customer satisfaction have to be certain scores. I will say, like, if it was me and I was starting a new job, what I would do proactively, if my manager didn't do this first, is I would want to sit down with them when I started and find out, what are the KPIs? What are the expectations for me to have within those 3, 6, 9 months, so you have every chance that you can to be successful, and perhaps even extend it to goal setting. So, new hires often set specific goals with their managers during this onboarding time. And a lot of the success is measured based on whether or not those goals are met. And I think it's perfectly fine to say, I'd like to have a review at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, perhaps nothing super formal, but more of a discussion in terms of, am I meeting your expectations? And if I'm not, what are some things that I can do to get there, right? So, obviously hiring is very costly. Companies hire people because they want them to succeed. And I place a lot of the onus on the manager to give those KPIs to their employees. But for managers that don't, I think it's perfectly acceptable, again, to put the ball back in your court and say, I want to be successful. I want to be successful from the start. What are your goals for me? And again, how can I not only achieve those goals, but ideally exceed those goals? Put the onus back on you if that conversation is not brought up by your manager. And this is going to be the best way that you can ideally exceed those goals, if you know what the expectations are from the start.
Yeah, and to take it a step further, I actually am a big fan of bringing this up in the interview process. In fact, I'd even say a good recruiter will discuss this with you in the kind of initial walkthrough of the role, or the screening, whatever you want to call it. But I love when people ask me, what does the first 90 days look like? What are the big priorities? How does this blend with kind of the standard onboarding that I'll be going through, just getting my feet wet, learning the organization? how does that kind of blend together with the role specific priorities, especially if you're coming into a role that's a backfill or a role that is high priority for the business. I think it's a good indicator of, what the company is willing to share with you and how prepared they are to bring you in. Because that's the other side of this, right? Is, you coming into an environment where you can be set up for success. And so I would actually advise, I think that's great advice, Melissa. I would also advise just start the conversation early on and, use it as a signal to determine whether or not, is it going to be pure chaos if I step into this role? Or is there going to be kind of a strategic plan in place for me so I can actually, succeed and do what I need to do?
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Next question is one surrounding applying and what we all think might be an ideal time to apply for jobs once they are released. We know with LinkedIn, you can see, when a job was posted, how long it's been up there, and things like that. So how would you describe the ideal time maybe to apply for a job once it's released?
Yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, right away, right?
Right away.
I think that with LinkedIn, you can set up job alerts. And so what I would do if I was a job seeker is I probably would have that up on my screen during the day and maybe refresh it once or twice. A lot of applicant tracking systems, they house candidates based on when they apply to the job, right? And so if a role has many applicants, a lot of times the recruiters are only going to look at like the first batch of the early appliers, depending on how many candidates a role gets. Now, obviously, if 1,000 people apply, a recruiter's not going to have the bandwidth to read 1,000 applications. But if you're one of the first or early appliers, I think there's a much better chance. So I would say stay on top of any job boards and apply as soon as you are able to see the role and you feel you're a fit. I would also take it a step further, and I would even reach out directly to a recruiter on LinkedIn and or who you think the hiring manager might be, letting them know that you applied to the job, why you're interested, and attach a copy of your resume. I think, the days of applying to a job and hoping and praying and crossing your fingers are almost a thing of the past because of the competition that is currently happening in this very challenging job market. It's taking your candidacy and bringing it to the next level and again, proactively reaching out to someone at the company that you believe is a decision maker, get in front of them. They might respond, they might not. If they don't respond, at least you tried, but perhaps they will respond. And I personally love it when candidates do this because it shows me their professionalism, their proactiveness, and it makes my job easier. That there's a candidate that took the time to figure out who I was, and I'm always going to read those messages I get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I certainly echo that. I think it's well said around, most candidates actually won't do that. So by doing that, the kind of ATS as a filing cabinet analogy, it kind of alerts that recruiter to say, hey, maybe I should look closer in the filing cabinet for that candidate that displayed kind of that proactivity to kind of reach out, because most people just don't have the bandwidth to do that for every job. So if you're doing it, it shows that there's something you've got conviction around this role as kind of being a good fit for one reason or another for you. And then at least, as far as what Earn Better offers, we, again, completely free service. And you can do search alerts with us. So we actually index over 5 million jobs. And you can kind of go into our search tab, say, by title, by location, it'll help kind of filter for remote roles in certain locations, seniority of the role, et cetera. And then you'll get daily alerts for however many specific searches you want to set up. Just so I think that was like as soon as possible. And the more you can kind of get those alerts wherever you are when they come in. We do those on a daily basis, so you can kind of respond really quickly. And we even offer kind of a text opt-in too, that if you want to get those texts even more quickly and have that cut through the noise of your inbox, another kind of piece of functionality that we offer for job seekers if they're interested.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Tuck. I think one thing to remember, job seekers, is just companies. A lot of companies have they have metrics and goals they're trying to push towards. There's like an industry standard, an accepted standard of trying to hire under 30 days, trying to keep things moving and hire under 30 days. So 2 to 3 weeks is a typical interview process. So you want to really try and get into jobs in that first week. When I'm job seeking, my alerts are set to 24 hours, but I don't really look at jobs past a week old. That's just my own personal preference. But the longer a job is open, there's so much more competition, and companies most likely have candidates in late, mid to final stages. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to win. So yeah, keep it to 24 to 48 and wake up each morning, grab your coffee and apply to jobs.
Love it. Coffee is very important too. Last question that we will take before we kind of wrap things up for the evening. What is a good response during an interview if you're asked, why did you leave your most recent position? And I can kind of touch on this one. As I kind of mentioned before about leaving for another opportunity to progress in my career, that is a response that you can give, leaving for career advancement opportunities. Sometimes there are positions or companies that we're with that there really aren't ways to kind of go up in the ranks because there are individuals who are already in those roles, and you kind of maybe hit your plateau at that company or in that particular position. So talking about, leaving an opportunity to advance in your career could be a response that you give there. Or as we've kind of mentioned and touched on also, there might be instances where you had to leave a role because you had to go take care of a sick loved one, or there's an illness or a death in the family. Responses like that are okay to give there as well. But we'd love to hear from Kevin if you'd like to chime in on this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, relocation. I mean, just there's a long list of reasons why. I think just going into context, and letting the recruiter know, and not just, I just left for more money. I don't think, it's not a really good response. I definitely wouldn't say that, but I think career advancement is good. If you took time off to take care of someone, I mean, people take career breaks all the time, yeah, I mean, there's a long list. But I wouldn't shy away from that. I mean, I think it's important because, if you have a short stint at maybe a company and you're like, well, it just wasn't a good fit. Sometimes it's just not a good fit. And that's okay. So, just say, hey, I was there for X amount of time, I love the atmosphere. It just wasn't what I was looking for, or it just, just wasn't a good fit. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, that's solid. That's solid.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have on that. So, let's see here. I'm gonna wrap it up.
Guys, this
We're gonna do some
storm is coming in
outros.
strong.
I was going to
You
touch
get-
on that. Actually, we are definitely, thinking about everyone who's in Florida, and please be safe. Daryl, along with everyone else who might be tuning in from Florida, we're definitely, thinking about you all and hoping that everyone comes out okay.
Yeah, definitely want to thank everyone for coming. I was looking at the numbers, the live numbers, and we had a really good turnout. So thanks for showing up. Tuck hasn't asked me to, but I definitely want to do a huge shout out to Earn Better and their tool, their product. The beautiful thing about their product is, as many of you guys know, it's free, and it really empowers you on your job search. Having a good resume is a really hard skill to acquire. And so having a tool like Earn Better to help you get a better resume is going to be gold. And I love what Tuck touched on earlier in the evening about Earn Better can help you with those alerts, because I'll tell you right now, the early bird catches the worm. So if there's anything out there that can really help you get in front of people like myself faster, then you should be using it. So definitely has my full endorsement. Go sign up, use the product today.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you,
Oh.
Oh, I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to echo that, what Daryl said. Yes, thank you, Tuck and Molly. Molly's not on the call right now, but you both have been great partners. this is, love what you guys are doing for the job seeker community, and so happy to be partnered up with you guys.
Well, yeah, it's been a pleasure to kind of be on this. Thank you, everyone, for joining more broadly. We know that the job of a job seeker is a hard one, and we just firmly believe that job seekers need more support. Not another bill, and so that's why there's no ability to kind of put your credit card information or embed anywhere, because there's enough uncertainty in the job search as it is, where we don't want you uncertain of where you might hit a paywall on our product. We just want you to feel comfortable and confident and empowered in your job search. So everything from resumes, cover letters, tailoring applications, job tracker, job alerts, interview prep, interview training, etc. There are just so many aspects that we want to provide free support around. And so, loved all the great questions from the audience. Don't hesitate to reach out to me with any feedback on the product or any other questions you have too. But this has been a great event, great energy, and a great set of questions. And really thank the panel too for all the insights they were able to provide and giving their time for this event.
Alrighty.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Have a
joining.
good one.
Take care.